what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are starting again with the file transfers. We are actually going to do transferring files with code and miscellaneous file transfer methods. I want to start with, there's no labs in this one, so there are optional labs you guys can do on your own if you want. So I will not be starting up the attack box. One of my gripes with Hack the Box, as you guys know, is that you can only start the attack box so many times per day, I believe it is, and that frustrates me, so I don't start it unless I have to. And so just heads up, I'm not going to be doing the optional labs. I'm going to walk you through everything they're talking about though. Okay, so it's common to find different programming languages installed on the machines. Perfect. Great segue into hit that like button, hit that sub button, guys. Helps out a ton. Let's get going. So they're right here. Okay, so you never know what infrastructure you're getting into. And so that's why it's important to know that you can transfer files with any code. And what they're saying is, if you look here, Windows has default applications such as CScript and MSHTA to execute JavaScript or VBScript, blah, blah, blah. Cool. What they're saying here is there's 700 programming languages according to Wikipedia. We can create code in any programming language to download or upload or execute instructions to the operating system. This is true. So what does that tell us? That tells us that whatever code we find that is usable on that machine, we can somehow use it to upload or download. Now, they could have it limited, they could have it blocked, etc., etc. We're not talking about that. We're talking about natively, just by having it, right? So here we're showing Python. We've already shown Python doing file transfers, right? So all we're showing the differences here is we're just showing a quick little download, right? So with Python 2 here, you notice they're using Python 2, not Python 3. They're just saying import URL library, URL lib, retrieve, and then they are grabbing here Linux enumeration script, and then they are saving it as Linux enumeration script. Now, keep in mind, you can use the same command, and then you can pipe it, if you're using it on Linux, right into execute and bin shell, and then boom, you have an actual fileless download. So think about that. Now we go to Python 3, same thing. Very much the same, just for a little bit different. You can see the only difference is you have URL lib request here instead of the URL library. You have URL library.request. So they're not pulling the whole URL library, and then they're using the request URL retrieve. So the only difference there is they're not pulling the entire URL library, it looks like. Now, the one I want to talk about here is this PHP. I'm glad they brought the stat into play, because I was just gonna not make it up, but like kind of just say a lot. But here they give you the stats. 77.4% of all websites with known server-side programming language have PHP. That is why you see this all the time in CTFs. You see it everywhere, right? So keep in mind what that means is, if you can run PHP code onto that machine, you can 100% download files, or if it has the capability, upload files. All right, and we're back. So you can see here that right off the bat, if you have PHP capabilities to run code, you can download, and like I said, if it has capability, you can upload. Why is that important? Well, if you have a web shell, you won't have a user, right? Necessarily, you'll have a www data or something like that, but you won't have a admin or Joe Schmo or whatever. So you need to be able to run PHP sometimes if you're using a web shell. So in that case, here we can actually use file, set it as a variable, file get contents, and it is just the same thing, Linux enumeration shell, and then they're getting it and then they're putting it, right? Really easy, really nice to see. But these are good one-liners that you should take with you. You should take these, use them as a shortcut, have a cheat sheet laid out with these in here. I'll tell you, I add these things every time I see a new good one-liner like this. I add it to my notes, even if I haven't used it yet. Add it to my notes, try and use it later, right? I think it's a huge thing that people don't do enough of, and that is actually grabbing things when they see them and writing them down, or having them saved somewhere, so that way, because you may read this and go, okay, cool, I understand, but I don't need that right now, right? And you don't think that subconsciously, but you think it subconsciously, and then you forget about it, and then 6 months from now, you're like, I'm trying to download this file using PHP, and I can't remember how. Boom, you have it saved, easy, right? So I recommend that. Now, Here's the same thing. The only difference is instead of using file get contents, they're using file open. Now, why is this important to know the difference? And it's mainly because sometimes there might be sanitation on that website where file get contents is actually quote unquote blocked, like they don't allow the file get contents. But if you can open the file, you can still get it to save. And you can see here they're doing the file open, same script, everything. And then they're saying once they open it, go ahead and write it. So that's the difference. So same concept, different way of doing it. The only thing is you need to know the differences because you need to use them if you ever have sanitation being used as a security feature, right? So now we have PHP download a file and a pipe to a bash. So this is the same concept. We're downloading a file, but we're doing it fileless, right? So we're taking the file, the PHP, and then we are piping it to bash. So it doesn't actually download the file, it runs it in bash. And you notice what you need to do for this is you need to put a for loop in there. For each line, it needs to run it in bash. Now the reason they do this specifically is if you don't do it for each line, it doesn't know where to break the commands, because in this Linux enumeration shell, it's broken. The commands are broken down in lines, and they're not going to probably be separated every single one with the proper syntax. So the URL can be used as a file name with the app function if okay, perfect. Now here's the other thing. You have other languages, right? But PHP is 77% of server-side language. You saw that. So 77%. That's a huge number, right? Now here we have a download file where we have done some CTFs on this live streams with Ruby. So we did Ruby, and then we have the required net, right? And it's just grabbing the URI. So again, little one-liner. I'd save it if I were you. Perl. Another very simple little one-liner, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all getting this Linux enumeration.shell. So it doesn't matter if you can write the code in this language, because if you can do it once, right? Think about it this way. If you can write a Python simple server, or you can write a Python upload or download script, right? One-liner, whatever you want to call it. Guess what? Very minimal research. You can write Perl. You can write Ruby. You can do that. You have to just understand fundamentally what's going on to piece that code together. So that's why I don't dive too deep into these, because there's no point, because I don't care if you remember this exact, like memorize this command. What I think about is if I said you need to download a file with Perl, could you get there? And you know, I could get there based on this, because I could store this and then save it. Even if I didn't store it, I could find a command that's very similar. I could just go through the Perl documentation and get to this point. It'd be very simple. So just think of it that way. Now, JavaScript, you can see they have JavaScript is a scripting programming language that allows you to implement complex features on web pages. Yep. The following JavaScript code is based on this post. Okay, so they have an actual, it looks like superuser.com. And they can download the file using it. We'll create a file called wget JavaScript and save the content. So you can see JavaScript's a little bit, it's not a one-liner, it's a little bit more complex, but they have a variable here, okay, and it's just a HTTP request. They're opening the arguments, okay. Then they're sending, opening, okay. They're getting the database, or the stream, excuse me. They're writing to it. Okay, so they're just opening the file and writing to it like we did with PHP up there earlier. So very nice. They're just doing it in a different way. So think about it that way. This is how thinking outside the box kind of works in cyber, right? They're not actually just saying, hey, download a file. They're saying open it and then write it over here, because there was no direct download function. They're opening it and then writing to it, right? It'd be like you, instead of just saving a file, you're echoing it out to read it on the command prompt and then writing it to, and then saying echo that into another file somewhere else. Okay, so now download a file using JavaScript. Okay, so here they're using csscript.exe, and they're saying, okay, they're now saying, then get using the csscript.exe, wget JavaScript. So they're using csscript.exe to run the JavaScript, which is then pulling this powerview.ps1. Cool, that's actually really nice, right? Because if you're on a Windows machine and you need this CS, or you have the csscript.exe, you can use that to run JavaScript to pull down the file you need. So pretty nice little feature there. Now here we have Visual Basic script, you know, pretty easy, pretty nice. And you can see they have the script laid out for you, very similar to the JavaScript one. They have the GET request, and then they save it to a file, right? So pretty nice, pretty easy. And then here they're using the actual csscript.exe again to run the Visual Basic script. So keep that in mind, that if you can use another program to run a different language, maybe it's not made to do that. Maybe it's just made to do something else, but you can use it to download files, which would then have malicious intent, and then you could run those files and then get a reverse shell that actually is the user or actually does have what you need, right? So it's very cool to see that, right? Now, I'm not going to cover the Python upload server again because this is the third time they've covered it in this file transfer. I'm not sure why they cover it so much, but they do. So yeah, I'll just say you can set up the upload server, then you can actually use, excuse me, the Python one-liner, upload files to it. You can check it out if you want. Here they break it down and they explain what it is, and they're just setting the URL. Then they're telling it which file to open, and then they're telling it here to use a post request to put that file on the upload server. And again, I'm not going to cover that because they've literally covered it twice already in this section. If you want to see it, just go back to episode 1 and 2 of this, and then there you go. And then here, they just tell you, hey, spawn the target system, log in, and practice uploading and downloading files using the different methods. Perfect. Let's go to the next one. Now, miscellaneous. Oh, my streak was in danger. I almost lost it. We've covered the methods. Okay, miscellaneous file transfer. So this one, I like this one a lot because they use Netcat. Here they're using Ncat as Netcat, blah, blah, whatever. The original Netcat was released by Hobbit in 1995. Project was produced Ncat, blah, blah. Netcat is just a tool that allows you to make connections. It can use whatever protocol you're connecting with, and it's a great tool. It's a perfect tool. Love it. Use it almost every day. So it's something we should definitely look at using. If Netcat is on a machine, you're in luck, because look what you can do, right? So it's just a listener here. So they're saying on the compromised machine, they took over a machine and they stood up Netcat. Netcat, NC, Ncat, they're all the same tool. They're different versions, right? So NC for Netcat, then L for listen, and then port 8000. So it's listening on port 8000, right? And then here's the file, sharpcats.exe. If the compromised machine is using Ncat, we'll need to specify receive only to close the connection once the file transfer is finished. Otherwise, it'll just stay connected. So that's cool. So now we say, okay, now we're on the compromised machine. This is just using a different version. Netcat, listen, port 8000, receive only, sharpcats.exe. So it's waiting for the sharpcats.exe, okay? So now we say from our attack host, we'll connect to the compromised machine using Netcat and send the file sharpcats.exe as input to Netcat. The Q0 option will tell Netcat to close the connection. So again, we need to tell it to close, or else it's just going to send the file and then that connection is going to stay open, and we don't want that. So you can see here what they did is they used wget to get this file sharpcats.exe, and then all they say is Netcat, and then they say close when after the transfer, run on this IP, which is this compromised machine here, and on port 8000. And this looks backwards if you know anything about Linux, because you know this looks like you want to write or you want to push it out, right? But you actually need to say read in, and that's that sharpcats.exe. And when you do that, this connection over here is listening, waiting, and it's actually waiting for that sharpcats.exe. And once you connect to it, it accepts it and says thank you, and then it closes the connection. So Netcat is so easy to use. It's so nice to have that opportunity when you're on a machine that it has Netcat already. And then you can see here, this is sending files to a compromised machine. So here, same thing, just vice versa. So now you say Netcat send only. Okay, so I want to close that connection afterwards. So this is using Ncat, not Netcat. And once you do it, same exact thing. The only difference is you say send only instead of using the tech Q0 option. Okay, so now attack host sending file is input. So this is pretty self-explanatory. You say sudo netcat listen port 443 and close after you submit the file, right? So this is sending the file as input. So here, sharpcats.exe. Now the compromised machine connects to Netcat to receive the file. So I already have the file. It's sitting here waiting. We say, hey, connect to the machine and grab sharpcats.exe. Easy, super easy. This is what you would see most likely You do see Netcat and things like that every now and then, so it's not that you won't see those. But if you can figure out one of these, you can figure out both of them, right? You could figure out real quick that the version's different. You need to change the syntax a little bit. That all comes with experience, and that just comes with doing it. You might do it a couple times, but like, it's not working, and look it up and be like, oh, I'm using a different version. So that stuff comes and goes. So now here we're sending file as input. So now we're using the same exact thing. We're just doing it with Netcat instead of Netcat. Okay, no problem. Instead of saying this here, where we do the 443 and then the little caret, we're actually saying send only versus the up here, the Q0, which is just to close the connection afterwards. We're saying send only and receive only. So same thing, different version, right? If we don't have Netcat, Bash supports read-write operations on pseudo device files dev TCP. Now, if you guys are on my Patreon, you know I did an entire video on creating scripts and everything using this dev TCP to make connections. So you can set up a reverse listener very quickly using dev TCP and send and receive files just like Netcat. So it's really cool to use. I don't know. Oh, they do dive into it a little bit here. Perfect. So here we have sending files as input to Netcat. Not going to dive into it because they're doing the same thing. They're just doing it back and forth different ways. They're doing it from one machine to the other. Perfect. But here's where they're showing. Here they have a listener set up, and then here they're using dev TCP, right? And then the IP and the port, and they're sending or going to sharpcats.exe, and what they're doing is receiving that file, that sharpcats.exe, that is being sitting here right here at this listener waiting for it. So instead of using the Netcat, they're actually using the native dev TCP. The reason that's really important or really cool is because almost every Linux machine that you're going to run to that has Bash is going to have this dev TCP, so you can actually use it whether you have Netcat or not, which is really, really, really cool. It's one of my favorite techniques because people all the time are like, I can't transfer files, I don't have Netcat, whatever. You can. You just got to think outside the box a little bit. Okay, and same thing here with PowerShell. They're going to use PowerShell to use WinRM, which is Windows Remote Management. And you can see here they say, okay, who am I? I'm Hack-the-Box Administrator. Okay, my host name is DC01. And they're going to say test connection. Okay, perfect. And you can see they have good connection. Everything's fine. But check it out. They're already admins, number one. So keep that in mind because you can see there is, if they tell you here, they have a session as an admin already. But there is a requirement, and it's either you have to be an admin, you have to be specifically laid out in the remote management group policy that you're given access to it, or someone has to go out of their way and explicitly give you the permission to do something to this box with remote management, right? So most of the time you're going to be an admin. Now what you're going to do is you're going to say session equals new PowerShell session, right? And then computer name is database01. Now normally you'd have to put credentials here. We don't have to put credentials here because we're already logged in as a domain controller admin. So we already have the credentials. We don't need it. And then you can see, so once you have that, you're going to say copy sample file text from localhost. So we're going to copy item, sample file text to session. And you can see they are going to specify this session. So they already laid that out. You could just take this new PowerShell session, computer name database01, and put that here instead of that session. But to make it a little cleaner, they just already made that variable declared earlier. Now the destination is C, users admin desktop. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna say, hey, I want to grab the user's desktop and copy over this sample text, right, and put it on the desktop. So what it's saying is the C sample file text, whatever it is, I don't know, we want it on the desktop. Okay, now copy database.text from database01 to our local host. So now we're going to copy their C users admin desktop database.text. Okay, so we're connecting to the remote machine, grabbing that database.text, and then we're sending it to just our regular C drive, and we're just using that same session. Boom, grab it, send it to us, right? So that is really cool because WinRM lets us remote manage and remotely run commands back and forth. So if you get an admin on a Windows machine with like a domain admin or something, you can start sending remote commands. So that's dangerous. You got to make sure you understand that. Okay, so now mounting Linux folders. So this is really cool. This is something I use a lot too, which is remote desktop, then use whatever IP. Domain is hack the box, users admin, password, whatever. and then they're using the drive is disk, Linux, home, user, RDesk files. Now what this does is it's actually mounting that as a drive, right? So you're actually able to start grabbing files, transferring files back and forth, and use it just like you would a regular drive. So it's really cool. And then you can see they're doing the same thing, but they're using X-Free RDP, which if you guys use like TryHackMe and stuff, they use X-Free RDP on their machine already. So same thing, just say X-Free RDP, the host, domain, username, admin, drive, Linux, home, plain text, Hack the Box Academy file transfer. So that is just using that. And then check it out. To access the directory, and you can see to access the directory, we can connect to the TS client, allowing us to transfer files to and from the RDP session. So now they just go to the network and they're on this TS client, and look, they have a Linux there, right? So you can see they have Linux. There's the drive Linux that they just created. Boom, boom, matches up. Now, whatever this home, plain text, Hack the Box Academy file transfer is, those files will be there. Then you can see here, alternatively, from Windows, the native mstsc.exe remote desktop client can be used. So you can go in and do it manually, which is, like they said here, you go to settings, select the drive, and then that drive is now has RDP connection. And it says this drive, after selecting the drive, we can interact with it in the remote session that follows. Okay, but this drive is not accessible to any other users logged onto the target computer, even if they manage to hijack the RDP session. So that is one reason why this might be something you use. But keep in mind, you're going to be doing a lot more command line stuff than you probably are in the GUI. So that's why I recommend knowing both sides of it. Now it says practice makes perfect, and they're saying these skills will help you on these boxes: the Active Directory enumeration and attacks, throughout pivoting, tunneling, and forwarding, attacking enterprise networks, and shells and payloads. Those are all Hack the Box Academy content. So that is why they're telling you to go ahead and try that. Now, lastly, the optional exercises. Go in here, start doing those file transfer methods, use the RDP, use the actual Windows machine and start connecting to it, setting up those, mounting those drives, etc., and messing around with it. It's the only way to get better. I will tell you it's something that you should I recommend you do all the time. If you just remember the one-liners or write them down, that's not going to help you much. You need to be able to do it pretty easily, I don't know why my face keeps fading in and out, but you just need to make sure you understand it and can do it back and forth. Now, lastly, these last ones, we're going to do these in the next one, and then we're going to do the detection, and then we are all done. So hopefully you guys like this. Hopefully this stuff's helping you guys, and hopefully you guys can transfer files like nobody's business now. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.